Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the Icebrood Saga for Guild Wars 2. I know it's been a little while since my last Guild Wars 2 reviews, but I finished Icebrood Saga, and honestly, I'm already a little bit into Dragons, trying to get ready for Secrets of the Obscure, which is just around the corner. But let's talk about Icebrood Saga. Icebrood Saga is weird. There's a lot about Icebrood Saga that I like. In fact, every episode up until the last one, I really enjoyed. I like a lot of the intrigue and the characters. I like a lot of the story beats. I love the maps. Icebrood Saga is really good for like 3/4 of it. And that last quarter just falls apart, man. There's some good story beats in there, but it's so repetitive. I also don't love the mastery tracks. I think there's some really good stuff in there, and especially when we get down to the way station stuff, that's really solid. I like the way station a lot. It gives a lot of cool options. Of course, Drizzlewood Coast is great, so that doesn't surprise me that the mastery for that chunk of the story is really good. But when it comes to the essences, I think it almost feels like bloat when it comes to mastery points, and you're not going to use them for anything other than Biora Marches. That feels kind of like a waste. Then you have the Raven stuff, and that's okay, but Dragon Slayer just seems pretty much worthless to me, especially because that's only for Dragon Response missions, which are the least fun thing that I've done in this entire game. For a non-spoiler review, Icebrood Saga is still worth playing, in my opinion. I like it a lot for what it does for the characters, for what it does for some of the main cast, and also introducing some really interesting side characters. I like the story beats for the most part, and obviously if you want to know everything that's going on in the story, you kind of need it. It just falls apart at the end, and I feel like you need to know that going in when you're paying the price for this chunk of the story. The 5th episode's the worst one by far, and I would say is maybe even the worst one out of the game. Like, the personal story is solid. It's not great, but it's solid. Icebrood Saga has some good highs, but has some really low lows. And if you don't believe me on that, we're about to get into spoilers, and we'll talk about what happens over the course of it. But I do like Icebrood Saga. In fact, for a little while, Icebrood Saga was some of my favorite story in all of Guild Wars 2 before Episode 5 Champions. So, spoilers on from here on out. This is your last spoiler warning. There will be spoilers from here on. I really liked the prologue. Grothmar Valley is a really fun map. The metas are really cool. I love the concert. I really liked seeing the Imperators come together and getting to see the new Flame Legion Imperator trying to make things right. Ephraim, he's a really fun character. I like him over the course of the story a lot. And of course, our new character we get introduced to, Ryland. And then things take a turn. This prologue was really solid. I liked a lot of it. There's a couple things that went on a little too long, but for the most part, it was a really fun prologue, and the reveal at the end that Ryland and Bangar have completely betrayed everybody is really solid. I didn't see it coming. I legitimately thought Ryland was going to be a fun new addition to the cast because he's Ritlock's son, and, you know, here's Krisha, and she seems really cool. But that leads us into Whisper in the Dark, which is the first real chapter, and also we leave Grothmar Valley behind, and we don't come back to it, unfortunately, in the story. That's a really fun map, and I kind of wish we'd spend a little bit more time there. But Whisper in the Dark takes us to the Biora Marches, and this is a really fun set of story missions. Trying to figure out what happened with Almora, and trying to get her back, and meeting Javi, and trying to find Javi, you know, and figuring out this whole mystery of this whisper that is constantly whispering to us, and figuring out that's Jormag, and everything. All of that is really, really fun. I just wish the masteries were more fun. I don't love the Raven masteries, and I understand now, after I finished it, that Biora Marches and Drizzlewood Coast were split in two, and you got two halves of them as they rolled out. But I much prefer the second half of Biora Marches to the first, even though the first is really good story-wise, because the first half just doesn't feel like there's a lot going on in it. And the second half has a lot of really cool things happening. So, I don't know, maybe I just need to go back and spend more time in Biora Marches 1, first half of it. But This story step was really fun. I never felt any great desire to go get like the bone skinner stuff from here, even though that all looks really cool, but story beats were really solid. This of course leads us into finding Almora, which is a really sad moment when it happens. It gets even sadder later and figure out how it happened, why it happened. I really liked Almora Soulkeeper. She's a really great character, and for her to meet her end the way she did, it just doesn't feel right. Now, I'm not mad about it, right? It's not something that I'm gonna throw a fit about. It doesn't feel right in the way that it makes me want to go get revenge for her, right? I was charged from then on. I needed to find Bangar, I needed to find Ryland, and I needed to find out what happened. And of course, when we find out later, it just made me want to beat him even more. That leads us into Shadow in the Ice, where we get into the second half of Bior Marches. We have to find Drakkar. Bram is getting a little off. He's lost his bow. Garm's acting weird. The spirits are trying to lead him somewhere, but we don't know that yet, right? He's finding the lost spirits of the wild, and he's trying to figure out what's going on there, and all that's really good. Hunting down Drakkar is fun, and that meta event's actually really, really fun. I like all of that. It still feels like things are moving kind of slow in places. There's a section where you have to melt the ice with Ritlock and Krisha, and I feel like it went on just a little bit too long, but I also really like Ritlock and Krisha interacting, so I'm not really complaining about it, even though I guess I am, because at the same time I'm still getting more interactions from two characters that I really like, and both of them were in pretty bad shape here, because what are they gonna do? Their son's gone rogue. Is it just because Bangar's tricked him? Do they even hate Bangar? Well, Ritlock does, but what's going on, you know? And that leads us to the vision of the past, Steel and Fire. We got hurt pretty bad, the commander did, at the end of beating Drakkar, when Bangar steps forward to try and be the one in charge, and Bangar shoots us with the bow. So Visions of the Past gives us a chance to go back and see what happened. And that gives us Forging Steel, which is a really fun instance, honestly. I like that instance a lot. I wish that we got access to that map, because that map is really cool as we go through this whole area with Ryland's warband and have to work together and do stuff there. That's really cool. Honestly, I wish I could go back to that map and not just have to replay the instance to get those achievements. But that map was also really interesting. There were dwarves there, you know? Like, that was cool stuff. I don't understand why that's not a map. Combine it with Darkround Delves and you're good. I also really liked getting to spend time with Ryland's warband. They're all really interesting characters. Makes what happens later even sadder. But that leads us into Darkround Delves. And I think getting to spend these moments with Ryland makes his character way more tragic for me, because we get to see that despite everything that happened with him, there was still like a core of someone that could have been somebody great, right? The option was there. If he hadn't fallen in line with Bangar, if he hadn't been quite so desirous of power himself, right? Things could have been different. But here in Darkround Delve, we get the fight with Almora and Bangar fighting Almora, Ryland stepping in, and then Bangar killing Almora. It's a really powerful moment, and knowing that Ryland was the one that must have buried her, and again, it humanizes him in a way that I feel like they almost didn't expect us to care as much about Ryland as we do, and some people probably don't, right? But throughout the story, all I could do was be sad for Ryland. He kept making terrible choices, but man, if I didn't care about this kid by the time we reached the end. And it's what makes what happens at the end so tragic, because it didn't have to be this way. And Bangar Ruinbringer brought his ruin, but it's just as much Ryland's fault for jumping ahead and thinking he needed to be greater when he didn't have to be. Is it Ritlock's fault? Is it Krisha's fault? Probably. They share a part of the blame, right? And now they have to move forward knowing what's happened. But we're going to get there. We're jumping ahead. This leads us into No Quarter, we take and go to the Drizzlewood coast, and we get to start working with the United Legions. And this is a really fun section of the story where you have Smoter, and nobody likes Smoter. Smoter is incredibly annoying. He's also incredibly efficient. Gets stuff done. And people hate him, but also he gets stuff done. You have Ephraim, who's trying his best. You have Malice, who's doing her best. It's really, really good, right? You have Krisha trying to take over for Bangar, even though, can she even do that, really? Gritlock is just kind of there doing stuff with us, but it's a really fun time, and I believe this is where we get, throughout these next 2 episodes, throughout No Quarter and Jormag Rising, we get a great combination of the Char, interpolitics, and war, along with the Norn Spirits of the Wild. I think they balance that really well. I didn't think they were going to be able to do it, because so much of Whisper in the Dark is about the Norn, and so much of Shadow in the Ice is about the Norn, but also the Char. So much of Bound by Blood was about the Char. Visions of the Past is about the Char. I didn't think they were going to be able to balance it the way that they did, but little moments of other Norn making comments to Bram throughout this are really good. And I think for the most part, they did a really good job of combining the 2 sides. I still wish that we got an expansion, kind of like Heart of Thorns was for me, with my main being a Sylvari, where everybody got their time, because Path of Fire felt like it was supposed to be for humans, right? But what about Asura? Is that a little bit of Path of Fire too? A little bit of Heart of Thorns? What, you know, what about, and I guess we get a little bit of that here. What about like more stuff for the Norn or for the Char? I don't know. I was really worried they wouldn't get anything. I think it's really well done here. I still think it would have been better to have like one group get the main focus, but I think they did a pretty good job with it here. We also get to see Snarl and Galena again, and that was great. Been forever since we've seen them. Love that. I wish there was more dialogue about like, hey, I remember you. You were there when we were taking on Zaitan. But, you know, that's okay. That's okay. I think No Quarter is probably my favorite episode, where we have to keep fighting against the Dominion. People are defecting, and we're desperately trying to stop Ryland's warband. And we succeed. We succeed in stopping them. I also just really like Drizzlewood Coast. That is a really good map, and I feel like it's almost like Silver Waste Part 2, because they took the idea of what worked in Silver Waste and made it work way better in Drizzlewood Coast. You can wind up just about anywhere for the cost of just a couple war supplies, which you're gonna make up. You know, it's a really, really fun map. It's maybe my favorite map in the whole game when I think about it. I really like Bloodstone Fen, but it's really, really good. From there, we get into the meetings with Ryland. We get into Smoter tricking us into bombing some people. That's not great. We capture Cinder, but when we finally get a meeting with Ryland, Smoter just kills her. And so Ryland turns. We get together. We come up with a plan. Smoter gets shot. Things are bad. Things are bad in the camp. And in the middle of all this, Bram just knows that he can get this door open, he can use the Spirits of the Wild, and we can stop Jormag. I forgot to mention earlier on that we had gathered the Spirits of the Wild and done their instances, their events to be able to gather them. We have to do some more stuff here. These are actually pretty fun. There's a really fun moment while we're an Eagle, trying to get Eagle Spirit, where Krisha and Ritlock try to talk to us, and we respond with an Eagle's Cry, and that was really fun. I liked that a lot, as they were just like, all right, seems like you're busy right now, we'll talk to you later, because it's just, you know what, this is the commander at this point. I also really like when Smoter and Bram are arguing, that in the course of that argument, it looks like you're going to get a choice, kind of like the personal story gives you choices, and then just no, Ryland just takes him out. I don't even blame Ryland, but also, as much as I hate to admit it, we kind of needed Smoter. So, from there, we work with Bram, we get through the door, which only, unfortunately, gives Jormag more power, all spirits back, and we fight. We fight our way in, and we were just too late. Bangar becomes the voice of Jormag, and Ryland becomes the champion of Jormag. Bangar's been betrayed, just as he always was going to be, because Ryland has always wanted to be more than Bangar, which is unfortunate because now he's a slave to Jormag as well. And Ryland thinks that he's got Jormag, like, covered. He controls Jormag. Jormag doesn't control him, you know? He's Jormag's champion, but it's not what he needed to do. There was a chance here where he could turn on Bangar and he could come back to everybody. Smoder's dead. He got his revenge, but he didn't just want revenge. He wanted to be more than his father. He wanted to be more his dam, right? He wanted to be more than Krisha. I guess that was his dam. He wanted to be more than, I don't remember what the char word for father is. Somebody will tell me in the comment section, I'm sure. He wanted to be more than both of them. He wanted to be more than Bangar. He wanted to be more than Smoder. He wanted to be more than an Imperator. He wanted to be the best. And now he's got a way to get it. And that leads us into Champions, which has an incredible, like, premise, right? Hey, Primordus is waking up. Jormag's active. Ryland's Jormag's champion. We've spent this whole expansion, this whole chunk of the story building up to this big fight against Jormag. Primordus is waking up too. This is a great start, right? This could be a really good run of another, like, 10 story chapter where now we jump to Primordus' side and we work through that, and then we have one big knockdown drag out fight at the end, or we have to quick take down Jormag so that we can be ready for Primordus. And instead what happens is this is the last episode of Icebrood Saga, and we're gonna have an entire living world's, an entire expansion's worth of Primordus shoved into this one episode while we also try to wrap up Jormag. And what it leads to is an extremely repetitive story chapter that is incredibly boring. And I've heard people talk about this before in comment sections leading up to this. I've heard people say, hey, you're going to hate Icebrood Saga. I don't hate Icebrood Saga. I just hate Champions. Because I understand that during this, there was some stuff about how Anet was forced to stop and work on the expansion, End of Dragons, and how both of them wound up being short because of it. We'll see. I'm only a short ways into End of Dragons so far. But, man, this episode could have been incredible. Ryland trying to work with the Asuran Council, promising them that the land that Primordus took from them will be returned to them. Working with us as an ally. Bram giving himself to Primordus so that Primordus has a champion, so he can force Primordus to come and fight. The Spirits of the Wild interacting with Bram to protect him so that he can do that. A final knockdown drag-out fight as 3 champions of the different Elder Dragons fight while the Elder Dragons fight above them. This could have been incredible. But what this chapter winds up being is, hey, go talk to these people. Now go do a dragon response mission. Now go talk to these people. Now go do a dragon response mission. Now go talk to these people. And you're going to do that 10 times as you have to do every dragon response mission. Then you get to go do the final instance. Expansion over. Icebrood Saga's done. Wrap it all up. We're done. I don't care that really that Canuck's voice actor changed. I noticed it. It's not as fun. Matt Mercer does a good job, but it's not as fun as John DiMaggio, right? But it's fine. What I do care about is that dragon response missions are some of the most boring content I've ever done in a video game ever. Every mission starts with, hey, do this pre-event. The pre-event is always going to be 3 tasks. You're going to have a really hard time doing it solo, so you can try going public because you only have 5 minutes. For every one of these tasks you complete, you get a bunch of bonuses to your stats. However, if you do it online, if you do it public, or you have more people to do the pre-event, you may not even necessarily get put into one that has more people to start with. They might join as you're already going, and you have less time to finish it. But the enemy, the boss's HP scales based on how many people are in there. So after the first, like, 4 that I did public, I just started doing them private. If I could get the bonus stats, great. If not, all right. Then you have to follow an NPC, some of which can go on their own, some of which you have to baby for them to be able to get there because they'll just stop walking if you're not walking with them. And then you fight a boss. And the boss has 1 or 2 cool mechanics, and that's the mission. It's an instance shoved into replayable content in a way that I really don't like. I like the instances in this game a lot. I really do. These are not fun. These feel like they went, hey, we don't have time to make 10 unique instances so you can get all this NPC dialogue, and we don't just want to drop a bunch of NPC dialogue on you in exposition. So we're going to spread it out over the course of these little missions using maps that are already in the game. And I'm not even upset at going back to maps that are already in the game. I think it was cool to see rocks again. I think it was cool to have all that dialogue. I listened to all of it. I got every bit of dialogue from every NPC. But they just were so boring to do. The HP sponges for the bosses that just soaked up the damage. And then it would always be like, hold off this many waves. And sometimes the NPCs wouldn't even help with the waves. They'd just be standing there while I'm fighting the waves. And it took me out of it every time. And your reward for doing 10 dragon response missions is to do the final instance, which is okay, but also is really short. And then it's just over. Jormag and Primordus are done. Jormag doesn't get a speech after all expansion where you've been talking to Jormag and Jormag's been talking to you. Jormag doesn't get like a big farewell speech or anything. They're just gone. They fire beams at each other and they die. It really sucked, man. I was really enjoying Icebrood Saga, and those dragon response missions almost made me stop doing the story altogether. Like, I really love Guild Wars 2, and those dragon response missions sucked the joy out of the game for me. I really think they need to consider going back and limiting the number of those you have to do, because having to do all 10 of them just, it almost broke me. And then the ending is just bad. Just, hey, Bram's okay, which is fine. I didn't want Bram to die. I like Bram as a character. I'm glad he got to do his part. He was the Norn of Prophecy. Jormag's dead. He succeeded. But that's kind of it. There's a really powerful moment with Ritlock and Krisha and Ryland where Ritlock has to kill Ryland. And Krisha tells him that she wishes she'd never had him. That she wishes she'd been able to spare the world that pain. Which is a really powerful and really hurtful line for a mother to say, right? Not saying Ryland didn't deserve it, but it really made me sympathize with him even more of he's not ever going to be able to come back from this. And he knows it, which is why he rushes her to try and kill her, and Ritlock kills him. It's a really powerful moment. You don't get to go talk to him afterwards. I'm not saying that you necessarily should have. I think it's almost more potent that you don't. But then it's just done. It's not, hey, go back to the Eye of the North and we'll wrap all this. It's just done. Icebrood Saga's over. You did it. You talked to Aurene and some of the magic slipped away. And you do that in the Eye of the North, but it's not like you get to go back and talk to everybody, right? You go back to the Eye of the North, you talk to Aurene, it's over. And I really feel like Icebrood Saga deserved better, man. I'm hoping that End of Dragons doesn't have story problems like this right at the end, but we'll see. I'm a part of a way in there so far, and as soon as I get done with this review, recording this and editing this, I'm gonna go play more, because I want to try and finish it before Secrets of the Obscure. I really dislike what happened with Icebrood Saga, because man, it's kind of soured that story for me in a way that I really hate, because I really enjoyed the intrigue with the Shar. I really liked the stuff with the Norn and the spirits of the wild and everything happening there, and it was not good. And I say that as somebody that loves Guild Wars 2, somebody that has loved every chunk of the story more up until this point. Living World Season 4 was incredible. This was not. Ultimately, I don't really recommend Champions. I recommend you play through the rest and then just imagine a scenario in your head where the commander fights Ryland and Bram and they win and the dragons die. They were just beams, man. They both fired a beam at each other and it was over. We didn't even get to see like full body shots. Like Zaitan's death was bad, but it was better than this. At least we shot him out of the sky and we got to see him collapse. That was cool, even if it was a really boring mission. I really like the characters, though. I really like Krisha. I really like Ephraim. Ephraim's really cool. I hope we get to see more of him in the future. Bram got some really cool moments here. Taimi didn't get to do too much. She was important, but she didn't get to do too much, but I still like Taimi. Ryland was a great addition to the cast. I think what happens with Ryland and his warband is really tragic. And I really like the addition of them into this world. Some people that we can't just save, some people that don't get forgiven, they're gone. They left their mark on this world, and we weren't able to stop them, and we weren't able to get through to them. Like Kronkatorek at the end, you feel kind of bad for him, right? Balthazar, you feel a little, not too much, but you feel a little bad for him. But there's a lot of feel bad for Ryland's Warband, and there's just nothing you can do. It's too late. And I really like that on a fundamental level, that they weren't treated as if, hey, you should sympathize with them. They were just introduced to you as a group of friends, as some up-and-coming char that were about to change the world. And they changed it. They changed it for the worse. And they're dead and gone. And the world has to live with the ramifications of their choices. I really, really like that. And it's why Champions makes me so upset. Because it didn't have to be this way. But it is. Let me know your thoughts on Icebrood Saga in the comment section down below. Like I said, I love the maps. Drizzlewood Coast is maybe my favorite map in the entire game. I love that map. Fiora Marches, the second half is really fun. The first half is okay. It's got a cool spooky vibe to it. And Grothmar Valley is just great. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I hate being this negative about a game that I love, but I can't help it. Champions is bad. The rest of Icebrood Saga is really good. Champions is just bad. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been The Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum. The Guild Wars 2 has to offer.